Welcome, everybody, to this episode of O365A. What we'd like to do on this podcast is use our collective experience to give you some tips and tricks from the field to help you with Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365. So tonight we're just going to do a roundtable of current projects we're working on and give you some tips and tricks which can hopefully help you on your journey. Habib, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. I have a couple of things that I'm working on. Have some customers that are piloting shared channels or Teams Connect, and just some of the things that we're going through around security concerns and security assessments and stuff like that. So we're currently engaging with the security teams to obviously validate what kind of security is happening within the background, how the authentication happens as well. Along with, there's some things to consider as well, ensuring, from user information protection, what data is being shared about the users within your organization outside. So those are just some things to consider if you're doing any type of those, I guess, information protection on a user level. I'm still doing some some compliance management that I've been working on for quite some time. I'm also doing Teams tenant to tenant migration. So certain things, you got to, I guess when you're looking at stuff like that, what you need to discuss, what channels are moving, if you're going to move, Teams as is into the new environment. I think, it's important to understand if you plan to have, like a new structure in the new tenant, whether you plan to, rename them or adjust the naming convention. So you might want to take care of that prior to migration. So all of your team names and your channels will be, in your new naming convention prior to migration. And then something as well too is, applying user mappings so that, if you're migrating from one tenant to the other, obviously you need to make sure that the users that are part of your teams in the source are also part of your destination. Otherwise, you're going to get like unknown user, or depending on the solution that you're using, you may use the service account that those messages that those individuals posted, I guess, in the source tenant will be posted as the service account that you're using to do the migration and stuff. So just a couple of things that I wanted to quickly just talk about and add in for some of the things I'm working on.
Good stuff. Dino, what are you working on these days?
Yeah, I've got an interesting customer that I was brought in to help. They're comprised of about 50 different sites or sub companies that represent the parent company, all running disparate phone systems. So literally each site operates as an independent company, and they're all using a wide variety of different phone systems. So their goal is they wanted to get to Microsoft Teams and have one phone system instead of 50 different phone systems. So they had gone down this path of doing these like super deep dive discoveries, which was chewing up a lot of project hours and not really resulting in any traction or movement. So they kind of put things on hold, and I got involved, and we kind of flipped it on its head and said, look, let's do things a bit differently here. Let's try to take a more agile approach and work with 2 or 3 offices at a time and get an understanding of what they need. So we started off with a couple of quick interviews with the IT staff and the local receptionists, and just got an understanding of what they were looking for. And that's important because often you look at what you have. A lot of people think you got to look at what you have and that's how you can migrate. And that might be true, but with phone systems, often a lot of what you have is kind of really archaic. And it's funny, the first few of these interviews that we've had, a lot of the times they start off with saying, look, what we have today is not exactly what we want. So documenting that and trying to replicate it made no sense. So it's kind of been interesting to determine this. So literally, this organization's already running Teams, so they've already been using it for collaboration. So we get started, we get them up and running on a voice pilot where we get everybody, enabled for Teams voice on whatever they happen to be settled on calling plans. We then build out some sort of temporary call queues and auto tenants for them to use and just trial it, so that they've still got their regular phone system, so they're not having to. They can get their feet wet and understand how this is going to work using some new DIDs. And then when they're comfortable, we schedule cutovers and then we flip them over. And on the Monday we follow up with them, make sure that things are working right. If there's any kinks, there's usually a couple things that they say, oh, you know what, let's change this message here or change this option. And just resolve and go from there. So they found that this agile approach is really working well for them after about 2 or 3 iterations at this point. So I've got 47 more to go. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, in terms of recommendations and quick tips there, I think I would say you need a PM to organize all the scheduling, organize all the local contacts. That's super critical. So that just, the technical team can focus on what they're what they're supposed to be doing and creating the auto tenants and call queues, that type of thing. And, I think we're trying to run with 2 to 3 sites at a time. So the planning's going on. We've got a master planning schedule, but then at any given time, we're probably talking to 2 to 3 offices, and they're all at various stages as to when they're going to go, with never more than 1 office on any given Monday that's going to be cut over. You certainly don't want to cut over 2 or 3 offices and all on a Monday morning and find you've got multiple offices and with issues, because then you're just going to be confused as to, you might make more mistakes because you're changing the wrong things. So it's fine to plan 2 to 3 sites deep, but schedule only 1 site per week, kind of thing. So that's where I'm at, and pass it back over to you, Kurt.
Yeah, well, I've been using Teams as a user to try to manage a project, and I've gone down this road 3 or 4 times before. And depending on the size of the project you have, it's interesting trying to use Teams solely as the one-stop shop for the project management. Because on one hand, Microsoft Teams, as we all know, you can plug in different apps, you can have different tabs, different channels. But I've always sort of struggled with, well, what's the best way to use Teams to set up and manage a project? And having gone through it again on a small scale, some tips and tricks that come to mind. One, almost all project in one shape or form has some static content associated with it. And that can vary from, quick lists to small one-page text documents to a more elaborate wiki type structure where you need to document architecture or describe various things of the project or the system. So I actually had never really truly tried the default Teams wiki app. So I gave it a shot, trying to sort of compare it to Atlassian Confluence, which is a more sophisticated, popular wiki. And I see why people with more advanced wiki needs don't use the built-in wiki app. It's good. It actually works for very basic documentation, but it doesn't have any version control. It doesn't have, um, doesn't track which user changed certain things. The UI is a bit cumbersome. Um, so my recommendation there is use it for a simple structure, simple wiki. But when you need something a little more advanced, you can use many of the third-party wiki tools, and then you can just include them as a tab, assuming that that wiki is available through a website. Still in the static content too, a couple other quick options. You can always add a tab and include a Word doc or a OneNote. OneNote can work good because you have the ability to have section groups and different pages. Lastly, on the static content too, you can use lists. There's a list app, or you can just use a loop component, which has a checklist if you just want a simple checklist. Um, on many of the projects I work on, we use Azure DevOps to actually run the projects, the sprints. One very easy integration, you can just add the ADO board as a website and put that in the channel, so it's always there. It's a nice, easy reference for the whole team. There is an Azure DevOps Teams app which helps you monitor, plan, and collaborate. I haven't used it in depth enough to know just how well it works. My initial impressions were it was a bit cumbersome, and I just actually liked including the website to Azure DevOps. Lastly, when it comes to task management, there is the Teams app, Tasks by Planner and To Do, and that allows you to manage tasks individually, which is like the to do part of it, or across your team, which is the old planner capabilities. And I've used it actually quite a bit, and I like it. It's not as full featured or functional as Azure DevOps, but often in projects you have the sprinting, you have the PBIs and the various features. That's Azure DevOps. But if you just need to track high level items, who needs to do what, um, that tasks app can work quite well. And last thing I'll say is if you do have sophisticated project management needs, there's third-party Teams apps available like Jira Cloud and various other ones that you can try out. So hopefully those tips help you get started managing a project in Teams. And Michael, what have you been working on?
Yeah, I mean, there always seems to be voice projects in flight. You know, a lot of customers are reducing their footprint in, Cisco Call Manager. I still have quite a few Skype for Business Link server decom projects moving to Teams, moving voice to Teams. So it's always interesting dusting off the Skype skills to, get all the information from the infrastructure to make sure to plan the migration. A little harder now with not the greatest hybrid migration experience with the tenant modes changing and stuff like that. Some of the things that come up in some of my voice projects lately is when we're dealing with like Avaya SBCs. I usually see that we have to do a little bit more work on the SBCs to handle transfers, blind transfer, consultative transfers between teams and the Avaya Session Manager or the Avaya PBX. So that's typically a rabbit hole that we go down is, making testing, making sure media goes both ways in those instances. A lot of advanced voice routing projects have started up. So contact center has been definitely on top of mind of a lot of the customers that have been doing voice now for a while and now want to, improve that customer experience. And then I guess one of the bigger projects that I'm working on is for an energy company that has been struggling transitioning from on-prem infrastructure to the cloud, specifically around resource account management. So this is, accounts used for common area phones, accounts used for Microsoft Teams rooms, accounts used just for meeting rooms that are for booking and stuff like that. So we actually went down the path of building a solution for them using Azure services. So we have a static web app, we have Key Vault, we have a provisioning engine done with Azure Functions. So it's interesting to kind of put all these pieces together to kind of automate the system where they were, passing it along between different departments and teams. And a resource account could take weeks or even a month to provision. And so when you have, hey, we're doing 80 rooms in a building, that doesn't really cut it. So it's been a learning event, kind of putting all the pieces in place, dealing with a lot of changes on the PowerShell modules. Exchange PowerShell module is changing. The Teams PowerShell module is changing. The Azure AD module is changing. Stuff around graphs. So kind of following along with all those changes and compliance issues between having three different modules working in sync and detecting errors. So it's been a fun little project to kind of put this together.
Very good. There you go. We got migration, voice, PBXs, and project management. All right. Well, hope those tips and tricks help you out, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. See ya.
So Dino, on your